Welcome back to Leaders Fireside Chat with the Dean. I'm your host, Professor Hind Benbya, and my guest today is Minister Jihad, Minister for Customer Service, Digital Government, Emergency Services, and Youth Justice. Minister Jihad, thank you very much for joining the conversation.
Well, Professor Hind, firstly, thanks for having me, and thank you for doing this. I think this is a really important thing that you do as a conversation for your students.
Thank you very much. So you started your journey in the education sector as a school principal, and you've gone from transforming a high school to leading major portfolios in New South Wales. What leadership lessons stayed with you throughout this journey?
I think the leadership lesson, the most important one, I think, was actually respecting others and respecting their views and having this idea of not necessarily a shared leadership model, but certainly a bit more of a flat structure leadership. And there's lots of things that transferred from my time as principal through to the role that I do now. But in the very heart of it, it was always about people. And it was also taking the time to actually look at the problem and discover what the true essence of the problem was and why we're doing things. So constantly, why do we do the things that we do and what's the impact on others? And teaching was a really great background. I didn't become a principal instantly. I was teaching for a number of years before I became a principal. But as you said, and some of the happiest days of my life were being a principal at Punchbowl Boys, because what we did is we developed something together. And I think that's the leadership thing that I do, is that I might be the person who gets to be the leader, so to speak, but I couldn't do it without everyone around me and for them to believe in the same things I believe in.
Great. So what was the pivotal moment that made you want to enter politics? Because these are completely different domains, education and then politics.
So different. And it took a long time for me. And I never really thought of myself as being a politician. What I was within the community. And if you follow the story of Punchbowl Boys, you'll see the work that we did was really about the school, but then it became the catalyst to change the community and really work on building a community to be better and to reach its full potential, which is what I love about unleashing the full potential of people and individuals. But that captured the eyes of obviously some politicians and some leaders. And Julia Gillard at the time she was education minister when I met her at a 2020 summit. This is back in 2000, I think 8. So that's how long ago. And I met her there, and she was very interested in what I was doing at the school because she was education minister. And so I spent a little bit of time in Canberra. And then obviously people started to see the work that I was doing, but I really wanted to be back in the school. So when this thing came up and it was the Labor Party was really, saying, we want you to be involved in this, it took me about 3 years to decide. Now, that's a long time for people who are impatient. And I didn't want to do it, to be honest with you, because I thought, I'm making a big change. I'm making a difference. We're going great. I've got a really great reputation. People are asking me my view. I was involved in things like, the Gonski Review, really having a say in what we can do to improve education. And I know politics is different, and I didn't really know it, and I was worried. But interestingly, it was actually a phone call from Bob Carr, who had been a retired. He wasn't even like the foreign. I don't think he was the foreign. No, he wasn't. He wasn't the foreign minister. He'd been retired. And he rang me up, and I'll never forget it. And he said in Bob Carr's voice, you're not doing this. What's the issue? And I just said to him, I'm worried that I won't be able to make a difference. I'm making a difference. I'm changing lives. And he said it to me, and I'll never forget. He goes, "You're making a difference to 500 people. Imagine if you're a minister, the difference that you can make to multiple people and those same ideas." And it kind of clicked with me. But the one thing then I decided is, I was going to be the politician that I wanted to be, and I was going to be true to myself. And that's been part of my journey. But that was the pivotal moment, because for a long time I thought about it, but not really, maybe, I don't know whether you call it the courage or whatever, but I thought, I'm in my comfort zone. I'm doing really well. We've got a great thing going here. I'm able to do everything that I want to do. And my heart's here. Why would I leave that into something that I don't know? Into something that I see politics from a distance. I didn't like the look of it. I didn't like the things I was seeing. I thought, I don't want to become like that. And that was sort of and I was honest enough to express my concerns and say, but the truth is, Bob Carr was right. The difference that I can make as a minister is so much bigger than I can make as an individual.
Sure. So Bob Carr, wise words of really making a difference to a larger population.
Yeah.
Stuck with you.
And you see that stuff in the youth justice, for example. I always have a real soft spot. especially for kids, because the kids that I was dealing with at Punch Bowl were the sorts of kids everyone had given up on, and people made judgments on them, and sometimes they didn't see their potential, and so it was easier for them to get into a negative spiral. And I could say, oh, we need to do this and we need to do this. But as a minister, I could say, here is the program that I want to do. And that's really one of the big differences.
That's great. So you currently serve as New South Wales Minister for Customer Service and Digital Government, Emergency Services, and Youth Justice. What are your top priorities across these three portfolios, knowing that they're completely
Yeah.
different? And how do you balance their competing demands?
They are so completely different, yet I find a way to make them work somehow. And they're all exciting and exhilarating in their own different way. And I love all of them for the different things they have. Part of the thing in terms of the demands, sometimes it's reactive, particularly in the emergency services. So earlier this year, we had a cyclone, we had floods, we've just had some bushfires a couple of weeks ago. We'll have bushfires going into summer. You have to be reactive. You've just got to drop everything and deal with that. That's just the nature of it. But you can do a lot of proactive work beforehand. I think for me, the priority in emergency services was really about getting them working together a lot better and getting them to share resources, getting them to, you know, remember, most of them are volunteers, so we're grateful for what they're doing, but getting them to work a little bit together. I think when you're in danger, it doesn't matter to you if someone's SES or RF, you just want someone there to help you. With customer service and digital government, that's a huge, that's such a big portfolio that someone said to me, oh, that's just Service New South Wales. I said, oh, that's just a small part of it. But I think for that one is remembering what we're doing. We're about serving the community. And that's what I mean is remember that really building that servant leadership. We're all serving the community. And the digital element in particular is saying, how do we use digital, so digital with purpose, not just for the sake of it. What's the purpose of it? How is the good that we're able to use and how is it changing people's lives? And the focus for me for that is inclusion. So I take every point that I can to remind people that we've got to think about those who would otherwise miss out. Because there's no use having the world's best digital system if not everyone can use it. And youth justice, of course, I've got a really extra soft spot for youth justice. So I'd asked the Premier if I could have youth justice. And I don't think people normally ask for, but I remember somebody said to me, oh, mate, what did you do to the Premier that he gave you that? Like and I go, what? I wanted that. And it's probably because I'd been working with young boys previous to that, and I'd seen what can happen if you change the way of thinking. And so, for me, the priority there is making sure that ideally young people don't get themselves into trouble. But secondly, if they do, and they're with us in the Youth Justice Centre or the Youth Justice System, how do we stop them from going back into the system? How do we get their life onto a better trajectory? Because I just believe that we need to do everything that we can to give everyone the best life possible. And you don't do that by just making speeches and by having good ideas. You've got to make it happen.
Right. So we're gonna get back later to the youth justice.
Yeah.
Let's focus on digital transformation, which is a major theme in your government. What innovations are you most excited about in New South Wales' digital future?
Well, we've just done last year. I say just done last year. Last year, we released the digital strategy. And that was an update on one that had existed because things had changed. But what we'd done a little bit differently, and it goes back to my time as the principal, is I wanted it to be not my strategy or just the government strategy. I wanted it to be New South Wales strategy. So in developing it, we took our time, but we worked with academics, we worked with the business sector, we worked, for example, with different groups of disability groups, migrant groups. We worked with everybody that we possibly could to say, if we were to have a digital strategy that works for everyone, what would we do? And then we came up with 5 themes. And at the very first one was accessibility. Accessibility, obviously, we've got productivity, we've got to develop the skills, we've got trust. Trust is so incredibly important. And I think when we have those as the main themes of our missions, it's not just to say we're going to do it. Our mission is to make sure that we achieve it. And so what I've been able to demonstrate very much is inclusion is at the center of what I want. And inclusion can't be a buzzword. It's got to happen. And it's got to happen in a way that benefits everybody. The trust, if you don't trust this system, how can we as government ask people to give us details and say, trust us? And we don't treat it with the greatest respect. We have to treat it with the greatest respect. And of course, we've got to develop the skills. So we've seen some really amazing things happen. But the focus and the thing that I keep getting feedback on is that we're looking at what the potential is for our digital government and governance, and how does it make life better for people, and how does it make sure that everybody can come on that journey.
That's great. So you pretty much assessed the priorities
Yeah,
of different stakeholders, industry, citizens, and other to take account in that. And you have identified, as you mentioned, the trust and the inclusion
yeah,
as key themes that are really people are worried about.
yeah,
And that's also links to artificial intelligence
yes,
is one of the uh, major technologies changing in this region sector. But when we talk about AI, you have always the divide of people supporting believe that it's going to create productivity and others, and the ones that believe it's going to take up their jobs. So you recently created the Office for Artificial Intelligence within Digital New South Wales. What inspired this initiative, and what outcomes are you aiming for?
yeah. Well, look, I mean, the two biggest things that people, I would say, will be concerned about is cybersecurity and AI. And AI is moving at such a speed that the AI framework that we had as a government a year and a half ago, it's almost like the world has moved on so much since then, and we were ahead of the curve. So the Office of AI, I think, was a really important step for us as government to say, hey, we need to be very proactive about what's happening in AI. I don't think AI is it's not a hypothetical thing anymore. We see it around us. We see how it's being used. So we go back to that point for me about digital with purpose. So we've got the framework that says, how is AI being used ethically and safely? They are really key points. And people who are worried about AI just because they don't know, or they're worried about the risks, say, well, hang on a second. The worst case scenario, I'm going to lose my job. This is going to take over. Where's my trust? So ethical and safe is very important. So then the Office of AI is looking at not only all those opportunities, but providing the guidance and saying AI can be used for good. But what are the things that we need to do? So we set about, a memorandum. So for all government departments, they've got to work within the framework. So say this is what we're doing with AI. Recently, I released, again, the same thing for agentic AI, which is like a next step to say, these are the rules for us as government to do. And this is what I want every one of our agencies to do, and make sure that we do that. So rather than just say, okay, AI, it's, open sladder, we'll say, yeah, look, we can do it and we can make it used for our purposes, that what we want, but it's got to be within this framework. And let's have a look at how we can use this potentially to boost productivity. Now, when you say boost productivity, some people see that as means losing jobs. That's the, oh, boost productivity, that means I'm losing job. But there's another way. Boosting productivity means you can get better services, and the person who would normally be, say, taking the phone calls or filling in a form can now do things that are higher order. So if you've got a problem with it, you can have somebody at the other end, whether it's a phone call, whether it's in person. The other element to AI that I really wanted to insert it in is the human intervention at different points.
Yep.
We've got to constantly have human intervention. So it's a way of saying, okay, this is evolving. We're not going to bury our heads in the sands. There's opportunities here. There's really big potential, but there's also some pitfalls, and we need to make sure that we work around that. So the Office for AI is about bringing in experts and saying, help give us some really good guidance, help us shape things. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. It exists. So let's make sure that we make the most out of it. And I think also there's a really good educative piece for communities that's really important about what is AI, what is an AI, what's the safeguard, what is the safeguard.
That's great. So the office's AI assesses the diverse initiatives in terms of risks, etc., but also plays a role in terms of AI literacy.
Yes.
How can we, as university, work with government? Because I think there's an important piece in terms of educating not just graduates and postgraduates, but educating really the larger population. That's a massive role.
Yeah. Well, Professor, you've hit the nail on the head. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. The education is, yeah, not just say in a university, you graduate, off you go. It's actually about all of society, and education in a way that is simple to understand. It took me a while, and I think the department's kind of worked it out when I just say, can you just tell it to me in real simple terms? Because if you are an expert in technology, and I can speak using all of the vernacular and all of the jargon that I need to, but I think about the community that I represent. I represent an area that's in and around Bankstown. It's a place where we say the world comes to live. It's so incredibly diverse. It's often one of the first places when people migrate to Australia where they go because there's such an incredible diversity. It's a beautiful community. But they don't always have access to everything. So I go, okay, if they've got a bit of a fear, their fear is not because they're cynical. Their fear is because they don't know. And if you don't know, you're kind of a bit hesitant. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at it was beautiful. It was a bunch, it was a group, and it was Indonesian women over the age of 50. And they were doing an introduction to AI. And they asked me if I would come. And it was actually at the Western Sydney University Bankstown campus.
Okay.
So WSU kicking some real goals there with the community.
Mm.
And I went there and I spoke to them. And now thinking about it, these are women who are aged over 50, many of them migrants to Australia. They weren't fearful. They just wanted to know. They were inquisitive. And so as a result, they were able to walk out a little bit more confidently of what AI is. Now, the roles that universities can play and all of us can play is, as I said before, this is not the Jihad Dib AI model or the New South Wales government. This is our AI model. You would have expertise that we don't have. The business sector and the industry would have expertise that neither you have nor I have. The multicultural sector, the disability sector, they would tell us what really works and what doesn't work. And I think the fact that we just keep communications open is important, and that we run lots of programs in simple bite size. If I'm a beginner into AI, I don't need to learn about the end products of it. I just need to know, okay, as a basic, what is AI?
Sure. That's great. Again, we mentioned AI's potential to boost productivity. Are there examples that are already making a difference in New South Wales government operations?
So you asked me before about my different portfolios and and I found a way to make them work. We use AI, would you believe, in fighting bushfires.
Okay.
And we're also doing something at the moment with the SES about flooding, using flood sensors and AI. And the way that it works is we use all of the information that we have, plus historical information that can identify what would happen if certain things go. So for example, with the flooding, it's got all the local rivers and all the tributaries. It measures how much water's in the soil already, and it predicts where potential flooding is going to happen. Now, we're not going to stop the flooding. And I always said, it's not going to stop the flooding.
No.
But what it will help us do is, one, get our resources to the places where they need to be. But more importantly, know what's going to be the impact on communities so people can evacuate quickly,
Sure.
so people can know how to prepare. This year, again, we use it for bushfires. So the bushfire predictor is, is an AI system. So it doesn't replace, we've still got a person out there with a hose. We've still got the helicopters and the Marie Bashir. We've still got all of that. But what it can tell us is if these winds are blowing in a certain way and they're going to change at this time, and this is the way that the fire is going, this is an area that will burn next. And so we start going there and doing preventative works as much as possible, start moving our firefighters to there. It really is about harnessing those opportunities to make better decisions. We're using it in the planning pipeline because we know housing is an absolute priority for our government. We're using it in schools with a thing called EduChat, which is actually closed off, call it a closed network that uses proper examples of education that teachers and students can use within a verified framework. We're developing, for example, on with government documents, all the different simple, well, what is this agency? What do they do? Something that just simplifies it. And the next step is using that then in language and looking at over 70 language. We are the most, you hear that, we're the most multicultural nation on earth.
Yes.
And this is our modern Australia. And I don't like sometimes when people say multicultural Australia, because it's like there's a multicultural Australia and another Australia. It's not. This is modern Australia. But for some people, English is not their strength. So it's about using that. It's about using AI to be able to improve things for all of society. Imagine when I can get a message to somebody who speaks a language other than English in a much stronger way. If I get them a message in language, something they're comfortable with in dialect, the difference that would make for them. So, I mean, that's some basic examples, but we're really looking at that opportunity and always within that safe, ethical, and digital for purpose framework.
That's great. That builds on the next question around building bridges. And you have been praised actually for building bridges across diverse communities. What does inclusive leadership look like in practice for you?
Inclusive leadership, and thank you for that. Like, I'm in a bit of a backstory here. I came here as I think it was 3 or 4, couldn't speak English, went to school, couldn't speak English, back and forth to Lebanon until I was about 11. And my proper schooling didn't start until year 5 with Mr. Parmiter. It's amazing. I remember his name. That's
Yeah.
my first ever teacher in Australia, Mr. Parmiter. I was in 5P. And, I grew up in an area that was quite diverse in and around Hurstville, but I also grew up not having everything and not having lots of things, but never sort of feeling like I was on the outside. I think inclusion is more than a word. Inclusion is about doing everything that you can to make sure that you understand things from different people's perspectives. So you don't have to like me and I don't have to like you, but I have to understand you and I have to respect you and I've got to understand where you're coming from and the things that make you the way that you are. And I think when we do that, it's actually a really respectful way of being able to deal with. And we see that in a society like ours that is very accepting, very understanding, sometimes there's different tension points. And what we need is, rather than people who fan the flame, people who say, what are our similarities? What are the things that can bring us together? What are the things that can unite us? What are the things that we can agree on? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing, which is they want to live a good life. They want to live a successful life, a healthy life. They want to live in peace. We all want the same thing. So we actually look at those things that bring us together. So that's from a social perspective. Then I look at it from my portfolio perspectives. And portfolio perspectives is about saying, okay, inclusion means people who are missing out for whatever reason. So if I talk about the digital journey, but you can't afford to have a device, how's that inclusion? Or you don't know how to use that device, or you can't access it. That's not inclusion. How can I talk about inclusion when I might say, I've got programs for young people, but the people who need them the most can't access that program or they're not suited for them? That's not inclusion. And when I talk about the emergency services, inclusion is about saying the door is open to everyone to be a part of this. How do we make sure that we look after the elderly as much as we look after the person who doesn't speak English, as much as we look after the person who's wealthy, the person who's not, the person with a disability? I want to give you one inspiring story for me. I look after surf lifesaving, and in surf lifesaving, we're talking about inclusion. They've just done a program, and I'm so incredibly supportive of it, called Swim Brothers and Swim Sisters, where people from, say, Arabic Muslim backgrounds, for example, are now surf lifesavers. To think about where we were in Cronulla 20 years ago, to the fact now that you've got Muslim lifesavers as part of surf lifesaving New South Wales patrolling the beach at Cronulla, shows you the difference. And the next one is at Coogee, they run the drones. So we looking for sharks. Unfortunately, there's some sharks in the
Yes,
water,
there are.
and we want to try and get to the sharks before they get to us. Um, and there's people there with a disability who physically cannot be lifesavers to stand on the sand and run in, and so they're part of Surf Lifesaving, but they run the drones. So they are just as important to my volunteers who are standing there on the beach, because what they're doing is they're able to sit at the veranda there at the surf club and operate the drones. And that to me is inclusion, because we're saying there is a spot for everyone. We're a family that brings everyone in. So inclusion has got to be something that's not just a word.
Yeah.
We've got to live it. And even in my office, so include leadership. This is what leadership looks like. When you see something wrong and you know it, you've got to speak up. You can't lose your voice. There's no use having a title if you're so protective of your title that you won't say the things that you believe in, the things that are reported to you.
Mhm.
Because people will see me. My name is Jihad. I don't hide of who I am. And they will see me, and they don't have to be a similar background to me, but they've had a similar experience wherever they might come from. And I know, whether I like it or not, I'm a role model to them. And some of them will see me and they might say, if he can do it, I can do it. I can be something like that. I can be better than that. I can make sure that doors are always open. And my opportunity is to open those doors for people, to make them feel that it doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your faith you practice on, it doesn't matter what color you are, how rich you are. What matters is there's an opportunity, and give people the opportunity. And so in my office, I have got the most amazingly diverse office. And part of it is people are good at their job. But there's also another element where I say it makes us better when we see things from different perspectives. That's what leadership is, taking the opportunity, not to climb the ladder and then kick the ladder away, but to climb the ladder, put your hand down and help more people up and understand where they're coming from.
That's a really great message. So I think we touch a bit around that, which is how do you ensure that government services are accessible and equitable for culturally diverse communities? And you already, I think, answered that question. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that one?
I think recognizing that our community is made up of all sorts of people, and making sure that we have services for all of them. Give you a really good example, and this is where you can make a change as minister. We may create this fantastic new website, and it's fantastic for people who are digitally literate, for people who have got no problem with English, for people who are confident. It's not a good website for people who don't. What about people like my mum? What about people who don't have access to the internet? Where is the human element? Where is the bit that understands where they're coming from? You walk into a Service New South Wales centre, it looks like our community. For a long time, government services didn't reflect the community that they serve. For a long time, our boards didn't look like they do. Our parliament, our New South Wales Parliament didn't look like our community. And I think those things are really important. That is not only about inclusion, leadership, but accessibility. Because when one of my colleagues who was a boat person who came from Vietnam to here tells me about the experiences and what happens with the Vietnamese community, it helps me make a better decision. So the more accessibility we have to one another, the better our government services are. And the government has to serve. We have to be about leadership and about servant leadership. Public servants is that at the very heart. We serve. And that's the thing we can never forget.
All right. What does success look like for you in these roles over the next 2-3 years?
Hopefully continuing the work that we do to see it actually come about. Like all the work that we're doing now, we're starting to see those differences. I want to see our digital being so incredibly inclusive. I want to see our device bank, which makes sure that people who don't have access to a device get a device. We're working on a program now of data sharing. I want to see the emergency services working even better together. But what I really want to see is our state reach its potential, and for every single person in our state to know that there is a place for them, that their story is just as important as anybody else's. And I think that's the role modeling that we can give. And we've got to keep that at the forefront of all of our thinking. Sometimes in government and in business, you just go, I want to get to a point really quickly. But I go, but what's the point? Why are we doing this? Never forget the why we're doing this. So success for me is about seeing everybody know that they are part of this, the inclusion piece at the heart of every single thing we do.
Great. If you could implement one bold policy tomorrow without resistance, what would it be?
Well, the key word being if. I do bold policies already, but everything has a bit of resistance. If I think about in the emergency services, remember they made up a lot of volunteers. I would love to see, they don't do it because they want a pat on the back, but it's nice to be able to thank them for it. They're the ones who, when there's a storm and everyone's kind of like in bed under the sheets, they're out there in the storm. When there's a fire, they're out there in the fire. When there's an awful car crash, they're there. That's the volunteers. And they do this because they believe in a service more than this. But I would love to see something that's a recognition of that. So is there a way, for example, and this is within the feds, is there a way that, for example, there might be a tax break for them? Is there incentives for them? Is there a thank you that we could provide? Not because it's ever going to be enough, but I think it just shows that, this state is grateful for the work that you do. In service and digital government, the really bold thing, I'd love to see every single person have access to the internet. Everyone have access. We still haven't got there yet. And we're doing some work with different telcos, but also I think there's a role for the government to play there. Service, continue with what we're doing. We don't really do bold stuff there. Just make sure that anything we do it right. Youth justice, I would love to, a bold thing I want to do is when a young person finishes up in youth justice, that they never come back again. and that we do everything that we can to get them into a job, get them into further education, change their life. Now, that's the aspiration, but the boldness is in having a group or having a facility for that to happen. So, for example, if I'm in Youth Detention Centre and I've learned some basic skills around carpentry, how do we take it to the next step to get this young person into a job? And when they're sort of failing a few times, lift them up, lift them up, lift them up, so they can get into that consistency. How do we get them into the university or, into school to rebuild their life? Because the tragedy that I see is too many young people get in this path. And unless there's a way out of the path, we do it. We can say to young people, we want you to change, but we've got to do more than that. We have actually got to be the person who helps them, holds their hand all the way through. So the bold stuff there is about sort of establishing a mechanism for that. And that's hard because in theory, everyone wants it. But at the same time, we've got issues where, if you're a victim of crime, we need to find that balance. If you do the wrong thing, there has to be a consequence. But I don't want the consequence to be a consequence based on revenge. I want it to be a consequence that ultimately is about changing behavior.
That's great. What advice would you give to young leaders who want to make a difference in public life?
Do it. And the reason I say do it is I never, when I was younger, I'm still young-ish. When I was younger, I never would have thought this. Growing up, all I wanted to do was to have a good job.
Yeah.
Because my parents didn't have one. They didn't have a secure job. They didn't have a regular paying job. And growing up, that's all I wanted. And, I got a good job. I became a teacher. But it's more than your job. It started doing all the things that I started volunteering. I started helping out, started going above and beyond because I wanted somebody to have a better life than the one that I had growing up. And so get involved in service in any way you want. Don't think to yourself, I'm going to be an MP, so I've got to do X, Y, Z, because when you do that, you're not doing it with a good intention. Join a local community group. Help someone, help the elderly, help someone with a disability. Help somebody who you think to yourself, if someone didn't help me, where would I be? So I want to repay that, paying it forward. And also, don't be afraid to get involved. Sometimes places can be a little bit closed off, but get in there. But remember, what's your purpose? Your purpose is to make a difference. I've always said that leadership isn't the badge. I'm lucky I get to wear a badge that says minister. But that's not the leadership. The leadership is in what we do with that badge. So I could be a leader in my family by being the first one to go to university and to make that change. I could be a leader in my community by helping somebody fill in a form. I mean, I knew one community group that was back when, the issues were happening in Afghanistan with refugees, and, it was really awful. One of the community groups set up for people who knew how to fill in forms, were filling in visa applications for women who were in Afghanistan. That was talk about leadership. That's leadership for me. Leadership in terms of every organization that you get involved in. I think when you do that, you start to feel better about yourself. And there's something really good about making a difference and helping someone out. Don't do it in a patronizing way. You do it in a way because you genuinely want to help. It fills your cup. I still go down and pack food hampers, for different community organizations. No fanfare. I just turn up and I do it, and it fills my cup. It reminds me of what we can all do. You don't have to be a minister. You don't have to be a dean. You can be anybody in any position and be a leader.
That's a great message. Minister Jihad, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Professor Hind.
Thank you.
Thank you.